All right, guys, I've been wanting to make this video for quite a while, so let's get into it. Shirt change. So I was talking on our 3-Point Perspective podcast the other day, and it just worked out that I ended up pulling up this quote and I read it in the podcast, and it made me think of doing this video for you guys so I could go into more depth here. And I'm just going to read it because I can't say it any better than this. So Ira Glass said, "Nobody tells this to people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's this gap. For the first couple years, you're making stuff. What you're making isn't so good. It's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not that good. But your taste, and here's the thing, that got you into this game is killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. A lot of people never get past this phase and they quit. Everybody I know who does interest in creative work, they went through years where they had really good taste and they could tell that what they were making wasn't as good as what they wanted it to be. They knew it fell short. And guess what? And I'm adding ad-libbing because I'm excited about this. Everybody goes through that. When I first read this, I felt it to my core. And if you're just starting out, or if you're still in this phase, you got to know it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is to do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month, you know you're going to finish one story. Or in our case, one illustration. Or in someone else's case, a piece of photography, a really nicely designed picture. It's only going through a volume of work that you're going to catch up and close that gap, and the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. I took longer to figure out how to do this than anyone I've ever met. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while. You just have to fight your way through that. Ira Glass. Okay, so here's the thing. That's one of the number one questions we get for our podcast is, I have this vision of what I want my work to look like, or what I want my illustration to look like, and what I'm able to create doesn't end up looking like that. How do I get to that point where what I'm looking at? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through let me see if I can advance this. Yeah, I'm going to go through my earliest work up to present and compare it to my vision and tell you what I was thinking when I created it and what I wanted it to look like. And some of this is pretty embarrassing stuff to show, but this is how we get better, right? Is we're open with our artwork, and we're humble and we're honest, and we know that we can, the journey of making great art is never over. We're always going to want to do more. Now, this is a horrible slide. This was the first oil painting I ever did. I think I was 10 or 12 years old when I did this. I asked for an oil painting set, and my parents for Christmas got me an oil painting set. And I mean, like, this is great if you're 10 or 12, but it's not a great picture. And it turned out, it kind of had a feel, but when I was done with it, I was like, I could see all the problems with it, and it's like it just didn't, the telephone pole's too short, and the perspective on the train tracks is working, and and it was cool and it was neat. It was neat to put the shine in the moonlight and all, but then I never had anything to really say. So everyone that looked at it was kind of like, that's a set of train tracks you got there, And so I didn't have a concept. I didn't have anything to say, and I didn't have the craftsmanship or the know-how how to pull this off, and so it ended up being what it was. This is a piece that I did this year. So from that to now, there's a lot of learning that's taken place. And this image right here turned out pretty much exactly how I had envisioned it in my mind. So that's what I'm going to talk about, is how to close that gap. Now, before I keep going, I want to just tell you guys really quick, my Kickstarter just launched today, and it's for this book right here, the complete Kickstarter Playbook. And I'm going to talk about it at the end because I don't want to interrupt this video too much. So if you stick to the end, I'll give you more information on that. But if you go to Kickstarter, You can see it live right now. Okay, so this piece that I did right here was in college. It was my sophomore year in college, and it did not turn out what I had envisioned. I had this vision of this. Number one, the anatomy on the child is going to be a lot better. And shadows, and I didn't know what to do with the feet down there, so they kind of just fall away. And then the hand coming in from the corner is so distracting and so heavy in that corner. And I didn't know how to articulate the anatomy on the little girl's hands. Her head is a little, and neck area is a little suspect and weird there. Overall, it's a decent piece for being a sophomore in college. But again, my vision of this, of what I had in mind, was so much better than the way it turned out. And when I got into the critique, I was doing that thing where, you tell yourself that it's better than it is. You're talking yourself into liking it. And you're like, luck of the draw when I go into the critique. Maybe, who knows, maybe everyone will just love it. And they didn't love it. And my instructor was pointing out all the things that were wrong with it. And he said there's some nice things happening there too. The texture's really heavy with colored pencils. Colored pencils is really a hard medium to pull off. You end up with more texture that ends up being distracting and inconsistent. That, coupled with the airbrush, this really soft, weird feel to it, doesn't really work out. And anyway, I could go on that. Fast forward, this was like 10 years ago. I really started to figure out how to mix my drawing and keep the drawing working with the color and working with the painting, and also to have a concept that works, what to keep in, what to leave out. Basically on this one, I didn't need that hand in there. And I didn't, I could have had the dog interacting with the girl instead of just looking up, and maybe the dog's giving some sympathy. And so that something went wrong, but you don't really need the hand in there. So as an illustrator, learning conceptually how to tell a story and how to tell a story in a really good way. I mean, like, you guys have people that in your life that some people are really good at telling a story. Some people are not good at telling a story verbally. Some people know the right points to hit, the right points to emphasize, and especially what to leave out. Other people, you're like, oh no, he's telling a story again. So that's kind of a big thing there. Now, what the heck is going on here with this child's face? I mean, this is like a mutant child. This is, if you saw a kid like this in real life, you would you would be scared. I really struggled, even as a professional illustrator for the first 10 years, trying to figure out how to make kids look like kids, trying to figure out how to make kids look cute. And it was killing me. And I would try, and I would talk to my wife, and I would say, what do you think of this one? And she's like, I could see it in her face, in her eyes. She's trying not to hurt my feelings, because she knows I just drew a mutant, and I was trying not to draw a mutant. And so she's trying to let me know in a really nice way that you didn't do it. It was easier for me to draw adults. I could make a kid look like an adult. I could not make a kid look like a kid. So I was doing lots of editorial work for magazines, images like this. In fact, I did so many images, so many bad images, so many horrible for magazines, that one day I just was like, why am I keeping all of this? I actually wish that I had kept more. There's a few paintings in here that I wish I would have kept. So this is maybe a word to the wise too, is even though you hate some of your work, make sure you keep some from every era. There's a lot of bad art that I wish I could have, even for this video, that I threw away. But at least I took a picture of throwing it away, and there's tons of it there. You can see. I just couldn't stand. It was like a reminder of how bad I was. And so finally I just cleared it all out and got rid of it. I was doing a lot of what I call little people paintings for corporate clients and for magazines and stuff. And those were okay. I was getting plenty of that work, but still I couldn't draw children very well. I could draw adults okay in my style at the time. I was also really limited in that my drawing skills were really weak, and you can kind of see that in a lot of stuff. Like, why is this light post 4 feet tall? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. Yet there's a 4-foot light post in there. So, and when I talk in my classes now, when I teach, at svslearn.com, I one of the things I talk about to my students is make sure that your props are valid props. Make sure that they're the right size. Make sure they're the right proportions. Make sure they're based on the right architecture for the right time period. All that stuff matters. And there was a sense that there was a certain amount of laziness that I can easily say took place back then, where you get to a point and you're like, that's good enough. No, it's not. It really isn't. And the neat thing is, as you get better and better, you will naturally start to demand more from yourself. And that's why you won't catch me making a 4-foot light post in a painting anymore. This one killed me. This was a portfolio piece. I probably made this maybe somewhere around the 20 years ago mark. And this is like a 3-foot acrylic painting. And, the little kid looks like an adult kid. It's like an adult child jumping on the bed. I could draw fun monsters, and I could draw the room and in my style, and I'm always had it. Color has always come easier to me, but the drawing, what's going on in the dress with the girl's body, I have no idea. But if you drew the rest of that body with those legs, it would look like a mutant body as well. I mean, like that is freaking weird. So I fixed it, and I fixed it by making a better face on there. And there's the new face. Because I was so frustrated that didn't look like a child. That looked like a 20-year-old college student, that I'm like, let's make it a child. So I made it a mutant child, and so frustrating. And I spent all this time on this painting, and I just put it away. I never did anything with it. I never displayed it. I never sold it. I never did anything because it was horrible. It was beyond my skill level to draw and paint a cute kid. And here I am, 10 years in as a professional illustrator, and I still can't do it. Fast forward a little bit further, I started doing editorial work, and again, my faces and things were getting a little bit better on adults, but still couldn't draw children. I was getting work. Sorry for the low res on this one. I didn't have a higher res version, but I was getting, advertising work. This one's for the allergy medicine Allegra. But they weren't asking me to do kids because I wasn't good at doing kids. Getting work doing adults again, for Mix Magazine here, and that all worked out. But again, it was the children's thing. So here's another one with, kind of a child theme, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll just draw animals and bugs, and I'll hide the fact that I can't draw cute kids by doing more animals and creatures. But my drawing was still lacking to a point where even they weren't convincing, and there were just so many problems with the mechanics of the figures and the things that just don't work. Mushy things in places, and rubberized arms and legs, and just and there's good primitive art, but I was with the style and the higher rendering that I was trying to do here. This drawing just doesn't match the rendering style, in my opinion. So I'm getting better, but again, the vision that I have is not being matched with the artwork that I'm doing. Then I got this book to do the Christmas Troll, and I think this was the second or third picture book that I did, and I nailed it on the color, I nailed it on the lighting, but boy, did I draw some mutant children in this book? And you can see it. And it's really simple. I just didn't understand the proportions of the face and bringing those eyes down low. And it's sad because there was a lot of neat things in this book, but the main characters, the children, I wasn't ready for it yet, and this was like 12, 13 years in as a professional illustrator, and I still couldn't draw cute kids. This was from a few years ago, and I figured it out. This painting is one of my favorite paintings. I love the twisted fairy tale, where Hansel and Gretel kind of get over on the witch. But, even though they're angry and meany little kids and scary, they're still cute little mean scary kids. And you got to be able to draw. You got to be able to draw the things that you want to draw, because your vision of those are, you're not envisioning drawing mutant kids or whatever you're struggling drawing with. Your vision is in drawing, in this case, cute kids. And I can do that now. I can visualize it. I can see it, and I can draw it. And there's nothing better. There is no better feeling in the world than being able to visualize and have your painting match what your visualization is. Here's another one where, my drawing just got a lot better. And a lot of that I have to attribute to working with Jake Parker. When we started working on SVS Learn together, I really had to dig deep and go back. And, as he was teaching his classes, I was learning alongside of him. I'm like, I really had to up my game working with him in the drawing level. And so these are much more current works that I've done. And again, every time I can see it in my mind, what I'm going to draw, and I can put it down on paper, and it doesn't, it doesn't work the first time. You have to tweak it and you have to keep fiddling with it, but you'll get to a point where you know what's wrong and you know how to fix it. And it's easy to fix. It's relatively easy to just keep working on it until you get it right. This was one that was just so hard. This was like, I'm going to estimate, because I didn't put dates on my art, but I'm going to estimate this was 12 to 14 years ago. And by then, I'm an established illustrator. I've been an illustrator, earning a living, full-time, freelance illustrator, sole breadwinner, supporting our family, making enough money to buy a house, and to have a normal life. And I can't draw kids still. And it was driving me crazy. I can draw the books in there. I can draw the background. I can put the textures in and the color. And these faces just were horrible. And I repainted that kid in the front twice or three times, 2 or 3 times. And I couldn't, every time I'd redraw it, I couldn't come up with anything better. And I'd redraw it and repaint it. And finally I just turned it in. And one of the worst things to do is to turn that into an art director, knowing myself that I don't even like it. I mean, look at the carpet. The carpet has fun patterns on it, and it's undulating and doing its thing. And what's the first thing you see when you look at it? The kid that sucks, the mutant kid. And then this one was probably 10 years ago, and I had really figured out how to draw a lot better. Even on this, I see things that I would do differently on this. This was when I first started working digitally, and there's too many things that are just too fuzzy in here. So there's, I've got line incorporated in areas and then no line. So there's some inconsistencies in here. At the time I did this piece, I was over the moon. I was like, yes, this is what I wanted, and looking back at it 10 years later, I'm like, it's pretty good. But there's some things that I would do differently. There's some things that I would, design-wise, that I would change. There's definitely some things rendering-wise that I would change. But overall, still, I still like this piece. It doesn't make me cringe that bad. But I mean, like, look at the backpack in the foreground. I mean, like, that's close to us. And yet, why is it more fuzzy than the cat that's in the middle ground, And so I should have more detail on that backpack and more detail on the kid's shirt and things like that. And okay, so here's another one that, again, I was so happy with this piece when I did it. This one's probably a little out of order. This is probably more like 15 years ago. But again, it was animals and creatures and stuff and not kids. So I was always happy when I was doing that and not working on kids. Then I got my first children's book about in 2003. So then that would be like, this is like 17 years ago or so, I guess. And so this was back in that time where I was really struggling with drawing. I actually made a video on this one where on that lizard there, where the eye is on the wrong side of the head. It should be wrapped around on the other side. But I didn't have the skills to pull that off. And I actually did a draw over on that one in another YouTube video. You can go back and look for that one. This was one of my favorite pieces in the whole book, and it worked out great. And I look at it now and I still like it. This was when I was painting in acrylic, so this was not digital. And this was a really fun one to work on. And I still like this piece, but there of course there's things I would do differently now. But it really, at the time, I was just tickled that I felt like I really pulled this off. It would look way different if I did this today. But what the heck is that? Same book. Look at this lizard. I mean, anatomy doesn't work for a lizard. I mean, like the legs are monstrous. I'm trying to do that forced perspective thing, the worm's eye view kind of a thing, and yet I'm not down low enough for that. Do you ever if you rollerbladed like that on your back wheel, you'd wreck. So it doesn't work mechanically. It doesn't work anatomically. It's just bad, and it's because I couldn't draw. So then, and I'm splicing in more current pieces to kind of give that contrast of where I was and kind of where I've gotten to now. You look at the skaters, and they look way more convincing in what they're trying to do. Anyway, this is another piece I did. This is a piece I did for a textbook company, and I felt like I was getting really good at this point, but there's just such a lack of detail and such a lack of anatomy. I didn't have the skills because I hadn't worked on my drawing skills enough to really do this piece justice. This could have been really nice. Instead, it's really colorful, but when you look at it, there's nothing more to look at. The scales are all the same size. They're really blotchy and they're not defined. I mean, like for this style with the amount of detail in the rocks, the lizard should have way more detail. And they should have more detail than the rocks. We're supposed to be looking at the lizards. And then another, fast forward to, again, probably 8 or 10 years ago, I really worked on my drawing skills. And this, hopefully as you're watching this, what I'm really hoping through this video is that you'll see this and go, wow, he really sucked. And, now he's better. And so maybe I can get better. You can. All of us can. And if you're struggling with this, I would suggest you get the Ira Glass quote. You can just Google it and it'll come right up. Just type in Ira Glass and making better art or the vision of my art or something like that. This was a piece that I did for Yankee Candle probably 12 or 13, 14 years ago. And while it was good and I didn't have to paint kids still, this might have even been a little bit longer than that, 15 to 16 years ago. But anyway, I'm still painting in acrylic here. And it's decent, but I couldn't paint kids at this time. And there's some real fuzzy things happening in some places, some things that I would definitely change today, but definitely getting better. And I, at the time, I was not disappointed to send this off, and the client was happy. And this was one of those that folded into a box to put the candles in. Okay. Now this one was one that I actually did do. This was a pretty big disappointment. I did this one, I'm going to guess 12, 13 years ago. And I really thought I had arrived then. I was really starting to incorporate my drawing with the paint, which is the style that I really wanted. And, you know, not losing the drawing and having everything go fuzzy and not having just a drawing, but having that paint or texture quality with the drawing. But my drawing skills still weren't good enough. And that owl up there, I redrew that owl a bunch of times. And I wanted this stylized owl, but it just, gesture-wise, there's nothing going on. It's falling off the branch. I mean, you can't sit on the branch like that. There's just design problems that really should have been worked out, drawing problems that should have been worked out on that character. And because it's the focal point really up there, it really needed to be drawn a lot better, and it's just not. And this piece really disappointed me because there were so many things that I felt like I did really well. But if there's a really big main focal point problem with your painting, it's ruined, you know, and it will fall short of that vision that you had. This is moving forward a little bit, probably 10 years ago, and I really like this piece. This is again a really current piece. I think that's what I've got now. So when I do a piece now, I have a vision for it. I could see this one. I actually saw this. And I can't see all the little details, but I can see, you know, what's going on in the piece in my mind, and I can pull it off now. And it's amazing to get to that point. This one was a few years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago. And you can see I have less line work in there. I still really love this piece. You know, the focal point is working as a focal point. The anatomy on the little elf is working. You know, it looks like he's hefting this heavy lollipop, and you know, everything. Again, this was another one that I envisioned, was able to draw it, paint it, and it turned out as good, if not better, than I expected. I mean, and you know you're working on a piece, you know when it's working out, because you can't wait to either stay, you either can't wait to get back to painting it, or you don't want to quit. You know, you're in that mode where it's everything is working out so good. And if you've never had that happen, it just means you haven't drawn and painted long enough, because there's nothing better than it being like 2 a.m. and you don't want to go to bed because you're working on this thing that is just working out so well. Or you save a piece for the next day because you know that when you wake up in the morning, you're going to be like, I can't believe I get to go and work on this thing. And that is something that every one of us as an artist wants. We want that. We want to be able to do a piece that is just as good as what we have been dreaming of. So this is the last one that I was going to show you guys. And this one is the most current piece that I did. And I just did this for fun. I put these, because we moved to Arizona, I'm putting these paintings up at my house and stuff, and just kind of having fun with the cactuses and stuff like that down here. But again, this is one that I saw in my mind, and I can just draw it and pull it off exactly as I want. And I can tell you, being in the other spot is frustrating. I shed many tears over time in trying to get to that point where I could draw and paint what I wanted and have it turn out as I wanted it. So that's the video. Now, if you want to hear about the Kickstarter, here we go. Hey guys, I'm back with a new Kickstarter. You might remember the last one that I did, What They Don't Teach in Art School, where we sold over 7,000 books on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and now we're up to almost 9,000 books and still counting. Well, now I have a new book called The Complete Kickstarter Playbook. Now, as a side note to my international backers on What They Don't Teach in Art School, please stay to the end of this video because I have a special message for you. Okay, so what is the Complete Kickstarter Playbook? It's a checklist book that gives you every step you need to take to be ready to launch your Kickstarter, starting with 2 years out, a year out, 6 months, 3 months, a month, 2 weeks, and then launch day, and even more importantly, everything to do during your Kickstarter and post Kickstarter. I've included extra lines so you can take notes, so you can add extra items, and each item is given to you in checklist form in the beginning of the book, and then each item is given with great explanation and advice all the way through the book. One of the hardest things about running a Kickstarter is making sure that you're not forgetting anything. It's a daunting task to create a product, let alone set up your Kickstarter. So this is a book that gives you all the things that you're going to be needing to do along the way and the timeline when you need to do them, so that you're not scrambling at any point during your Kickstarter. You can see everything that's coming, and you can do everything at the time that it needs to be done, so that there aren't any surprises. And this goes into the creation of your product as well as the running of the Kickstarter website, setting everything up and getting everything ready to go. This book's going to be printed domestically here in the US. It's going to help save me container costs, shipping costs, custom costs, and I'm going to be able to have the books ready to go out and ship out as soon as the Kickstarter is over. The book has been designed, it's illustrated. I already have a printer ready to go. All we need to do is finish the Kickstarter and send the orders off. I've created some great reward tiers. You can get the ebook, you can get the book alone, you can get 3 books. Some people are going to use this for 1 book per Kickstarter, as you can write and take notes and individualize the book for your Kickstarter. It's a workbook. I've also bundled What They Don't Teach in Art School with this new book, the complete Kickstarter playbook, so you can get that in hard or soft cover. Okay, so international backers. This is the book that I promised that I would give to you for free for the highest shipping costs that you had to pay on the first book. So if you supported What They Don't Teach in Art School on either Kickstarter or Indiegogo, then you will be emailed through Kickstarter or Indiegogo with a download link for free, where you can download the ebook version of this book. If you want the physical book, you can also purchase that on the Kickstarter. You'll never see this book for less later on after the Kickstarter. In fact, this is going to be the cheapest price. I will be selling the book for $24.99 or $24.95 on my website after the Kickstarter. So if you get this book, you won't have to worry about missing anything else on your next crowdfunding campaign.